Kenny Omega reportedly receives backlash over a speech at an AEW talent meeting. A major change is coming to NXT again, and Bray Wyatt held return talks with WWE. Find out all the deets in a bit. So we're going to kick things off with the Kenny Omega news. Now, news about this meeting broke around the time the new vice presidents of talent relations were being revealed about 3 weeks ago, a month ago.
So.
The meeting largely dealt with that aspect of things, with the rumors of WWE contract tampering also apparently playing a part of it, and the new structure of the company moving forward from a backstage capacity. Chris Jericho gave a speech at the meeting about his own feelings on AEW so far, kind of rallying the troops toward the future. And then Kenny Omega spoke in what has been described, according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, as a harsh, tough love manner style speech. So apparently this is from the Observer. The company meeting called several weeks back that the speech was part of by Omega. The speech was described as a pep talk and tough love, but some were apparently irked by a line he said that 8 out of the 10 people there he wouldn't have hired. He apparently absolutely said the line. One version is that it was very clear when he said it that he was being comedic. So, he was apparently looking at Will Ospreay when he said it. And then he was just messing with Ospreay. And apparently many people did just laugh about it and kind of brush it off. Which, you know, if it's one of those kind of, I wouldn't have hired, it's still a weird joke to crack. In the situation, but but apparently others took it quite seriously, and these people were upset about it. Several told the Observer that it was something so totally misinterpreted and taken out of context, but others didn't like it. He also apparently did say that the overall energy and locker room at the start of the company was more positive than it is now, perhaps in trying to recreate that time and place with the current roster. This feels like it could have just been a very awkwardly placed mistimed joke, but
obviously with everything that's happened recently, Kenny Omega was away from the company. I think he tried to stick with being on the road with AEW, but unfortunately his injuries just kept up with him.
Of course,
he just decided to just take time away from the company completely to rehab and recover. Since then, a lot of people have been signed to AEW, and I guess when the roster gets bigger, perhaps the locker room, as we've heard recently, sort of gets divided a little bit, being on one side and being on another side. And maybe if you don't have that sort of rapport with someone, if you don't know them that well and they drop a joke or a comment like that, it can be misinterpreted and misstrued.
But at the same time, is it the type of joke to really crack? That's the thing. Where it's a bit kind of
especially if you don't know the people too.
It's sort of, I don't know. It's a bit kind of like, things were better when it was just us. Now that there's all these other people, it kind of feels a bit like that. So I kind of want to hope, because I've never really seen Kenny Omega be outwardly, not that we would, obviously, but you never really see him be outwardly negative about much. It's just quite.
What's going on, noise?
There's just a loud rattling going on. But it's just, part of me, the fan in me wants to believe that it was all just kind of an awkward joke. But at the same time, it's just this, and then the ongoing situation, the tensions really feel like they are bubbling up in AEW right now. And I guess we're just going to have to wait and see how this develops, but it's a pretty awkward one.
It is. It will develop,
no matter how you look at it, and it will develop, because if it's rubbed people up the wrong way, and this was prior to the brawl, so Jesus. Moving over to the other side of the fence now, a major change is coming to NXT.
Another one?
Again, yes. They're going back to the white and gold colors with a black outline. As we've seen, that's kind of being dropped there publicly now. They're getting rid of the color scheme that Vince McMahon ordered 1 year ago. On TV, over the next 2 weeks, they're still going to be using the current color scheme, but that's changing. They may also drop the 2.0 name and just call it NXT. Okay. Now, I don't know whether this means we'll get a new arena, whether we'll get like an all, because it's a nice arena.
It is, actually.
It's that just abusive amount of color that does my head in.
Yes.
But I think, getting it under that other branding, I'm not surprised that NXT's changing almost immediately after Triple H takes back control over it. But I don't know.
I mean, does this make it feel like, and I know things have been said in the past as well by Triple H being like, it wasn't a developmental brand, and then more recently being like AEW be our developmental brand, or good on them or whatever. Does the branding back to NXT and maybe like the more serious color scheme, I guess, make it feel less like just a developmental brand again?
I think the problem with the developmental thing is that it's kind of stuck now.
Yeah.
The whole thing with NXT was that I get, Vince's argument apparently was that it's not really developmental. And Triple H was like, it's not developmental, it's a third brand. And Vince is like, well, I thought it was developmental. And, you kind of, people joke about, oh, it's sort of like the indie retirement home where you'd see sort of indie wrestlers go to. So I get why the company's like, well, we need somewhere for all new stars. So by getting rid of so many stars, they've fed other companies. And now, they could bring stars back, and I could definitely see that change happening back under Triple H, like going back to the black and gold style where it was less developmental feeling. But at the same time, I can just see maybe trying to go again for another run at like 2014, like just going straight in there, trying to use what you've got and trying to spin it in a more 2014 style.
I agree. I think it is going to be a little bit more like that in terms of having, obviously developing what's going to be hopefully new stars on your main roster. I also think that it's going to be maybe a blend of the two in terms of you bring maybe some well-known indie stars in to help develop those on TV as well and develop the characters.
You don't need to fill the roster with them. You can bring back one or two stars. And I think, it could even get to a point where if it is developmental, it's almost like class system, right? Where it's like, you get to a certain tenure within there, and if you are going to move on, you graduate through to the main roster. So I think that maybe it is just going to be sort of okay, let's hit the ground running again like we did back then, but all new direction, but maybe back to those muted gold colors. But moving on now, not moving on, keeping it with NXT, a key backstage figure has returned, and that figure is Ryan Katz. Well, if you don't know who Ryan Katz is, he's perhaps best known for his stint in XPW as GQ Money or his time as ring announcer in Wrestling Society X. He briefly appeared in TNA as well alongside Chris Daniels and had some cameo appearances in WWE before settling into a creative producer role for NXT in like 2015, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
He was released on January 5th of this year, and then obviously during all of these layoffs we've been seeing, but then rehired on September 1st. So this is just another person who has a depth of experience from their time in the independent world, being brought into a producer role again, being brought back to his producer role. And it's just, it's kind of what I like about NXT in the Performance Center is it's like a melting pot of all of these different influences from all over the wrestling sphere. You've got people from major companies. You've got people from middle companies. You've got people from like the indie world. You've got people from like just outside of wrestling. There's all sorts going on there. And I think the key thing is just having that indie representation, especially because, the style is moving back more toward that. So, and
obviously, just someone who knows the business too. That's what you always want. I think a great mind for people to pick, for wrestlers to pick, for other producers and other staff members working there to pick. Like, why not? Why not? I think it's a good move to have.
Yeah. And finally, he's probably one of the biggest question marks in wrestling to date right now. Like he's somebody that it's just endless speculation, endless rumor, endless fantasy booking, and just fans want to know what's going on with Bray Wyatt. And he knows.
He fans the flames.
We had speculation as rumors began to mount recently that Freddie Prinze Jr. was making overtures to bring him into like a startup wrestling promotion. And that speculation is going to continue to mount because apparently, according to this week's Observer, Wyatt has been talking to WWE. Now, apparently there were definitely talks in that direction. At one point, the talks stalled, but it was said that it is not a dead issue. So this sounds like it's an ongoing thing. Talks with him outside WWE had also stalled in the past, as his asking price was apparently well above what other companies were willing to pay him. When he was last in WWE, the belief was that he was behind Reigns and Lesnar, that the tier of Orton and Rousey were the highest paid pro wrestlers in the world. So I think he's somebody who I think definitely should be able to sort of name an asking price now. He's been on top, a featured star in the industry for as long as possible. But outside of that, outside of all the boring contract stuff, Bray.
I mean, I think it's a very clever thing for him to do, right? In terms, it feels very much like he's going about all these different promotions. He's sort of fishing around, what's the best. He knows he's leveraging everywhere. He's trying to leverage,
leaving
right?
breadcrumbs everywhere, and
I think that's the smartest thing to do, and that has definitely, I think, led him to be one of the hottest talking points in professional wrestling.
He's enigmatic, and his release was one of the most shocking things I think I saw. It was just like, what? Like, how can you look at him and get rid of him? I know that the story's kind of ground to a halt, but like, the guy's clearly full of ideas. But I'm hoping now that maybe if he is set to return to WWE, I don't know if I want to see The Fiend,
Meaning, I think that's the problem. Triple H, if you bring someone like that back, and if it is going to be The Fiend, I think you do wait until you have a definitive, solid storyline to put him in, and not make him look weak like he was booked to be in the past.
I think it's one of those things where, you've got Balor, who everybody obviously loves, Demon Balor, but Balor's doing different things these days. He's off in Judgment Day, he's doing all of that. I think if you were to have, say, not that it'll happen, but like this week or like tomorrow night, Wyatt returns, you don't have to have him be The Fiend all the time, or even Funhouse Bray, but I think that having that type of character like Demon Balor or like The Fiend, where it's able to just sort of pop in, or be called upon, I think that's pretty cool. But I kind of hope we get to see a whole new Wyatt, as much as I would love Cult Leader Wyatt back under the TV-14 rulings. Oh my god! How much violence can he get away with? It'll be fantastic. But thank you very much for watching our third news video of the day. If there's any more news, we will keep you posted. And on top of that, just have a lovely weekend, everybody.
Just have a nice one.
Bye.
Treat yourself.